Number 4, the Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Mr. Speaker, this question is to the Minister of Finance and asks, does he stand by all his statements?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr. Speaker, yes.
As the Minister of Finance, supplementary question.
Is this a supplementary question?
It is.
Supplementary question, the Right Honourable Winston Peters.
As the Minister of Finance, can he comment on this astute observation about the Overseas Investment Office, and I quote, "They are under-resourced, in my opinion," end of quotes. And what is he going to do about it?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm not sure who made that statement, but many people could have, and they're probably right. The government is in the process of looking at an increase in fees paid by overseas investor applicants in order to improve the resources of the Overseas Investment Office.
Supplementary question.
Supplementary question, Right Honourable Winston Peters.
How can increasingly concerned Silver Fern Farms shareholders trust the Overseas Investment Office to forensically examine this latest deal when that same keen observer added, quotes, "So when people say the Overseas Investment Office approves nearly everything put in front of it, that's true," end of quotes. And what is he doing about it?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the Silver Fern Farms shareholders can rely on the same process as anyone else involved in these transactions, and that is that the Overseas Investment Office has to apply the law, a law as brought into this House actually by that member. And if they believe that the law is not applied, they can do what a number of other parties have done, and that is take the Overseas Investment Office to court and get the courts to tell us whether they did their job properly.
Supplementary question.
Supplementary question, Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Now, if that same person, who happens to be the Prime Minister, says the Overseas Investment Office is under-resourced and that approves of nearly everything put in front of it, and the Minister of Finance is ultimately responsible for its funding, is he not alarmed that lawyers Harmos, Horton and Lusk formed the company that became Silver Fern Farm Beef Limited a full year before proposals were put to shareholders? If not, why not?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think I'd characterise the connection between those ideas as looseness of association. The Overseas Investment Office has the task of looking into all the commercial arrangements around any application that is made to it, and I'm sure if there's anything nefarious in this one, they will uncover it.
Thanks. Supplementary question. Point of order.
Point of order. Right
Speaker,
Honourable.
I seek leave to table a document showing the Minister has contradicted what Mr. Key told the Chinese Business Summit.
We don't need it further described. We need the source of the document and the date of the document.
It is a publication, Rural News, not widely available to members.
Order. Rural News.
Well, they've never read
Order.
it.
Rural News is very easily sourced by members. Supplementary question, Grant Robertson.
Which of his statements is correct?
Order. Start again.
Which of his statements is correct? Last week, when he said that the economy is, quote, going through another softer patch for the obvious reason of lower dairy prices, or a few months ago when he said that dairy is a smaller part of the economy than most people think, and that the overall performance of the economy depends on how the rest of the export sector does. Which is it?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr. Speaker, of course, both things are right. As I pointed out in answer to an earlier question, tourism is now our largest export and growing quite fast, and the dairy sector is around 7% of GDP. So there's no doubt the drop in dairy prices has had a negative impact on the economy. The success of tourism and ICT will have a positive impact on the economy.
Supplementary question.
Supplementary question, Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Minister, why would he rise in this House and say that I am responsible for this legislation, which is demonstrably false, or the Prime Minister claim that he can't change the law because New Zealand First will not support the tightening of the Overseas Investment Act, when not one person from the National Party has ever approached us on this issue? Why make these false statements?
The question's been asked. Honourable Bill English.
Speaker, well, they must have made the mistake of going to the Northland office of New Zealand First. Mr. Speaker, the member has never been happy with the fact that the current Overseas Investment Act was written under his sponsorship. We are enforcing Winston.
Point of order.
Order. Order. Order.
Point of order.
Point of order, the Right Honourable
Mr.
Winston.
Speaker, that is the second time that minister's made that claim. I'm not going to do the normal thing and call him what he is, but the fact is he should answer the question and not tell falsities.
Order. Order. The minister's responsible for his answer. He's answering it. If he's misleading the House, then there's an order. Then there's an appropriate means by which that can be addressed subsequent to the answer given. Does the minister have anything further to add? Question number 5, Grant Robertson.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Point of order.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker. I seek leave for this question to be answered by the Minister of Finance, for whom it was originally set down.
Order. No, I was unaware that it had been transferred, but if it has been transferred, that is the decision. Order. If the member wants to stay to